visionary, creative. You hear these words thrown around all the time in business, right? A lot of the time, they're used like they mean the exact same thing. But what if that's a huge mistake? Today, we're going to dig into the really critical difference between the person who dreams up the future and the one who actually builds it. So here's our game plan. First, we'll get right to the heart of the confusion between visionaries and creatives. Then we're going to do a deep dive into each role, the dreamer and the builder. After that, we'll look at the damage that happens when these two drift apart, and most importantly, how to bring them together to create something truly powerful. All right, let's jump right in. Look, every business loves to talk about vision and creativity, but here's the thing they often miss. These are two totally distinct and sometimes even clashing forces. And this quote right here, it just nails the core problem. A brilliant vision that never gets built is, well, it's just a wish. And on the flip side, a beautifully crafted product that doesn't have a real purpose behind it, it's just an empty shell. You absolutely need both to make something that matters. Okay, so this really breaks down the fundamental difference in how they think. The visionary is all about the 30,000-foot view, asking, why are we doing this? And what if we could? They're the ones naming a destination on a map that doesn't exist yet. The creative, on the other hand, has their boots on the ground. They're asking, how do we build this? And okay, what's the very next step? They're the ones actually making that future real. So let's start with the dreamer, the visionary. What really makes them tick? You know, it's so much more than just coming up with ideas. A true visionary is a world-class storyteller. They paint a picture of the future that's so compelling, so vivid, that other people can't help but see themselves in it and say, yeah, I want to go there. So how do they pull this off? Well, they think big. They cut through all the day-to-day noise to focus on the essence of an idea. This gets everyone's attention off the immediate problems and onto the exciting possibilities. And that energy, it generates a kind of social permission, buying them the time and the trust they need to get through that messy middle part of any big project. And that right there is the magic of their storytelling. You can't inspire anyone with a spreadsheet. It's just not going to happen. But stories that tap into our hopes, our identity, and our desire to be part of something bigger, that's what gets people to rally behind an idea. But here's the flip side, the real danger. If that big, beautiful vision gets too far ahead of what's actually being delivered, trust just collapses. When you keep making promises but there's no visible progress, people start to lose faith. And once that trust is broken, man, it is tough to win back. All right, now let's flip the coin and talk about the other essential role, the builder, the creative, the one who makes it all real. And let's be clear, this isn't about that old stereotype of some chaotic artist waiting for a lightning bolt of inspiration. In business, real creativity is all about disciplined problem solving. It's about taking an idea and wrestling with it within real-world constraints to make something that's not just visible, but actually useful and real. You know, the best creatives actually love constraints. A tight deadline or a limited budget isn't an enemy. It's a puzzle that focuses their energy. They're experts at taking a huge, overwhelming problem and breaking it down into small, solvable chunks. And they sweat the details because they know that's where a good user experience becomes a great one. They produce real, tangible stuff that you can test, learn from, and make better. But just like with the visionary, there's a shadow side here too. Without that clear, guiding vision, a creative might end up building a technically brilliant solution to a problem nobody actually has. Or they might get lost in the weeds, chasing perfection on details that don't really matter, long past the point where it's actually useful. So it's pretty obvious you need both, right? But what happens when the visionary and the creative aren't talking to each other, when they're not in sync? Well, the results can be pretty disastrous. And it can go wrong in two very distinct ways. On one side, you have vision without creativity. The story is amazing, the marketing is incredible, but the product or service just doesn't deliver. Customers feel let down. That's the promise gap. On the other side, you have creativity without vision. The work itself might be beautifully crafted and technically impressive, but it solves no real problem. People might admire it, but they're not moved to actually use it or buy it because it lacks a purpose. This quote just says it all, doesn't it? If you inspire people but don't give them something real to use, you failed them. And if you build something impressive that doesn't have any real meaning behind it, you haven't moved them. Either way, you've reached a dead end. So, if letting them drift apart leads to failure, the only answer is to bring them together. This isn't about picking a side. It's about building a solid bridge between the two.
The fix for this is a concept called vertical coherence. It sounds kind of fancy, but it's a really simple, powerful idea. It just means that the big story you're telling at the highest level has to match the actual experience a customer has at the ground level. From the CEO's keynote to the button a user clicks, it all has to feel like part of the same story.
And here's how you actually do it. You create a virtuous loop. It starts with the vision. Name a small, concrete piece of the future you can prove. Then creativity kicks in and actually builds that proof. When you deliver on that small promise, it strengthens everyone's belief in the bigger vision. And that belief, that's what buys you the time, the resources, and the goodwill to go build the next proof. It's a cycle that builds real momentum.
Now, this whole challenge looks different depending on your scale. In big companies, the enemy is often the huge gap between the strategy PowerPoints and the day-to-day work of the product teams. Bureaucracy and conflicting goals get in the way. But for solopreneurs, the battle is all internal. You're the one who has to hold both of these mindsets at once, constantly switching from big picture visionary to hands-on creative, and that can lead to some serious burnout.
So if you're flying solo, how do you manage this? Structure is going to be your best friend. Literally block out time on your calendar for vision work, asking why, and then block out separate, dedicated time for craft work, the actual building. Also, be really honest with yourself. Which one are you naturally better at? Then, go find the tools, the freelancers, or the mentors you need to fill in your gaps. And this, right here, is the ultimate payoff. When you get vision and creativity perfectly aligned, you build something far more valuable than just a product. You build trust. Your team trusts the vision because they can see it coming to life step by step. And your customers trust your brand because you consistently deliver on what you promise. In today's world, that trust is everything. So in the end, it's not about choosing. You don't have to be one or the other. What you do have to do is figure out how these two essential roles talk to each other. One points to the North Star, and the other builds the ship to get there. So I'll leave you with a question to think about. Which role comes more naturally to you? Are you more of the dreamer or more of the builder? And maybe more importantly, who's the counterpart you need to find to make your best work a reality?